Math!
Hey everybody, this is Mr. Regener and this is the Aftermath. Today on the Aftermath, we are focused on focus, and specifically today, we're looking at week 26, day 2. So if you want to follow along with your week 26, day 2 activity, as you check out this video, I think that's going to be very helpful for you as you prepare for this week's focus quiz. So let's get started with number 1. Number 1 says, Camila and Debbie went to the beach and collected seashells. The number of seashells Debbie collected was 7 more than half the number of seashells Camila collected. Let C represent the number of seashells Camila collected. Which of the following represents the number of seashells Debbie collected? So for number 1, before we even attempt to answer it, I want to make sure everybody understands you have to read carefully. If you're not reading carefully, if you're not putting forth a lot of thought into this one, it's going to be really difficult, almost impossible. So when we read this question, maybe use your pencil or pen, underline or circle some key words that are going to help you out in this one. I'll show you what I mean right now in this example. So here I am on number 1, and when I look at it, I see a key word here. It says Debbie collected an amount that was 7 more than half the number of seashells that Camila collected, and then I know that C represents the number of seashells that Camila collected. So I know that it's going to be 7 more than half the number of seashells. That's half of C. So when I say the number of seashells, I can think to myself, that is just C. So it's 7 more than half of C. Now it might also help to look at all of your options. This one here says that it's 2C. That's double the amount of C is greater than 7. Now I'm not looking at an inequality here. There's nothing here that says it's greater than or is more than. Now it does say 7 more, right? But that doesn't mean 7 is more than half of C. It's just saying 7 more than half of C. So I know it can't be letter A. Similarly, here it says 2C. That's 2 times the amount that Camila collected. And I'm looking for half the amount that she collected, so it can't be B. I'm really narrowed down to just C or D here. When I look at C, it says 7 is greater than 1/2 of C. Well, I do want 1/2 of C, but I want 7 more than 1/2 of C, not 7 is more than 1/2 of C. So this answer D is actually the only answer it can be, because that one says it's 7 more, because I'm adding 7 on, to half of C. So again, number 1 takes a little bit of logical thought, but I think when you think it through, when you underline or find the important information there, that one becomes a little bit easier to answer. Right now, let's roll on and take a look now at number 2. Number 2 says the practice range at a golf course charges $6 for a bucket of 30 golf balls. At this rate, how much will a bucket of 100 golf balls cost? Well, here, all I need to do is make a ratio, right? So I know it's $6 for 30 golf balls. So I'm going to write that down. That's $6 to 30 golf balls. All right. And I know that I'm going to create an equivalent ratio, and I want to figure out how much it's going to cost for 100 golf balls. Okay, and that's an amount that I just don't know. So I'm going to put a little box there like we did when we were doing ratios earlier in the year. Now, there's a couple ways that I could actually approach this question. Some of you might be really comfortable with unit rates. And if you are comfortable with unit rates, we could do some division here with this ratio and figure out either how many golf balls I can get for $1 or what the price would be of 1 golf ball. And that all depends on how I divide. I'm going to show you that super quickly here. So I could figure out the dollars per golf ball. That means the amount of dollars it costs for 1 golf ball. In doing that, I take the dollars divided by the golf balls. That's $6 divided by 30 golf balls. So 6 divided by 30. That looks like this, by the way. And some of you I know don't know that. So 6 divided by 30. I can't do that. I need to add a decimal and a 0. Now 30 can go into 60 2 times. That goes in evenly, and I have 0 as a remainder. So that means that my cost in dollars for 1 golf ball is 20 cents, because this we can think of as 0.20 dollars, that's 20 cents, right? I could also figure out the same type of problem here, a unit rate, but now I'm going to look at it as golf balls to dollars. In other words, how many golf balls can I get for $1? My unit now is dollars. And I would do that again by dividing, but now I'm doing golf balls divided by dollars. That's 30 divided by 6. Let me just show you what that looks like. 30 divided by 6. Now, I'm pretty math savvy here, so I know that 30 divided by 6 is 5. And 5 times 6 is 30. Goes in evenly, I subtracting at 0. That means I have 5 golf balls for every $1. So knowing all these things is great, but knowing what to do with it is even better. All right, so if I have 20 cents for 1 golf ball and I want 100 golf balls, I need to then multiply by 100. 1 golf ball times 100 is 100 golf balls. 20 cents times 100 is 20, or $20. Over here, if I have 5 golf balls for $1, well, then I need to think, well, how many times does 5 multiply to get to 100? And I think 5 times 20 is 100. So I need to take my dollars, $1 times 20 to get $20. So I'm going to take this times 20. Now, if you're not a fan of unit rates, there's a third way we could think about this. And that's just simply thinking about this. What do I do to 30 to get to 100? Now, I can't multiply it by 2. That's not enough. I can't multiply by 3. That's not enough. I can't multiply by 4. Oops, that's too many. So I could figure out what that exact number is by dividing 100 divided by 30. That tells me what times 30 equals 100. So let me do that. 100 divided by 30. Now 30 goes into 100 3 times. That equals 90. I can subtract and get 10. With that 10, I can make that a remainder, which would be 10 over 30. But I can reduce that down into 1/3. So if I multiply 30 times 3 and 1/3, I get 100. Similarly, up top, to keep it equivalent, I could take 6 times 3 and 1/3. And you guessed it, if we work out the math, 6 times 3 and 1/3 equals $20. So really, 1, 2, 3 ways that I could solve number 2. I'm not saying you have to do this 3 different ways. I'm saying you have to pick your favorite of the 3 ways to solve number 2. So there's our work on number 2. Again, make sure that you're working through that carefully. Pick the best method that works for you. Right now, let's roll on and take a look at number 3. Number 3 says a total of 240 trees will be planted in the park. There will be 1 pine tree planted for every 3 maple trees planted. You may use the coordinate grid to help you determine how many pine trees will be planted. Ooh, easy for me to say. So as we took a look at this here, there's a couple techniques that we can use for number 3, right? So all kinds of options this week. One of them requires us to maybe use our grid, right? So if I know I have a ratio of 1 pine tree to 3 maple trees, I can make an equivalent ratio that's going to be larger than that, and hopefully I'm going to have a total of 240 trees, because that's what I'm looking for. Now I can multiply this by maybe 10. That would give me 10 pine and 30 maple. If I plot this here, that's 10 pine and 30 maple. I'd have a little dot there. But that's not enough, because that only gives me 40 total trees. I need 200 more total trees. So maybe I'll try multiplying by 50. That gives me 50 pine and 150 maple. And I'm doing this math in my head, by the way. You could obviously do it on paper. If I have 50 pine and 150 maple, I only have 200 total. I need 240, so I'm still not quite there yet. But I could plot that if I want to. So 50 pine and 150 maple puts me right about here. Now, in a perfect world, I'm going to use this sheet here, actually. If I draw this as a straight line from my 0, 0 mark down here and connect my dots, and assuming that I've made my dots in the exact spot where they should be, and assuming that I can draw a straight line, the line on my grid here is going to kind of help me out, right? So if I know that this point here, 50 and 150, is right there, it's going to hopefully help me figure out some other numbers. Like, for example, if I'm here at 60 pine trees and I go up on my chart, right, I kind of hit a point here at 180. So the ratio of 60 to 180, if I think about that, 180 plus 60 equals 240. So if this is a point, that's going to be a real big help for me. So if I think about that, what am I doing to one pine to get it to 60 pines? I'm multiplying by 60. Let me just try this out real quick. So 1 times 60 is, of course, 60 pines. And then 3 times 60, well, that's going to be 200. Oops, what am I thinking? I'm not thinking right at all. That's actually going to be 180. 180 maple. Now 60 plus 180 is 240, so that's one way I could solve this problem. That's not the only way, and so maybe this other technique might help you if you don't like that method. And this method does not involve the chart at all, so maybe some of you are going to think that's a good thing. All right, this method is where I can take this ratio, 1 pine to 3 maple, and just simply turn that into a part to whole ratio. So I like to do some drawings here just to make sure it's super clear. So that's my pine tree, right? And that's a maple tree, and a maple tree, or 3 lollipops, depending on how you want to look at them. So if I have 1 pine and 3 maple, that means I have 4 trees total, right? This is going to be 4 total trees. So if I just simply turn this into a ratio, 1 pine to 4 total trees, I know I want to create an equivalent ratio where I have 240 total trees. And then I have an undisclosed amount of pine trees, right? So think, what am I doing to 4 to get to 240? And you may know that 4 times 6 equals 24, so 4 times 60 equals 240. So if I multiply this by 60 on the bottom, I have to multiply it by 60 on the top, and 1 times 60, you guessed it, is 60. So how many pine trees will be planted? My answer, of course, is 60 pines. 60 pine trees. And if my paper would move, there we go. There's my answer, 60 pine trees. So if you're noticing a common trend between numbers 2 and 3, it's that we have choice. You get the ability to choose the technique that works best for you. And coincidentally, I am not grading you based on your choice of the method. I'm grading you on your answer. So any of them will get you the right answer. You just want to use the one that's going to be best for you. Let's move on now to number 4. Number 4 is going to ask us about these numbers where we have decimals, percents, and fractions. We want to put them in order from least to greatest. Now this presents a little bit of a challenge for us as we look at it because, again, they're not all on an even playing field. I can't compare a decimal to a fraction to a percent very easily. So I'm going to transfer all of them into decimal form. I think that's going to help me a lot so then I can see easily which one's smallest, which one's biggest. Let me start with 1/8. Now if I have 1/8, I think of that like a division problem, 1 divided by 8. Let me show you what that looks like. Here's 1 divided by 8. I need to add a decimal here, which is perfect because I'm trying to get my decimal answer. Now 8 goes into 10 one time. That's 8. I subtract. I get 2. I add a 0 and bring it down. 8 goes into 20 2 times. 2 times 8 is 16. I subtract. That's 4. I add a 0 and bring it down. 8 goes into 40 5 times, which is 40, and that's even. I need to stop when I get a 0, and no stopping before that. All right, so my decimal is 0.125, or 125 thousandths. So I'm going to take out my 1/8 and write in 0.125 every time I see one. And there happens to be a lot of 1/8 here, so I'm doing a lot of substituting, which is good. All those fractions are now kind of evened out by looking at them as decimals. I see another fraction, 3/25. Just like we did here, we need to divide 3 divided by 25. So I have 3 divided by 25. Now this is obviously not going to work so well, so I add a decimal, add a 0. 25 goes into 30 one time. 1 times 25 is 25. I subtract and get 5. I add a 0 and bring it down. 25 goes into 50 2 times, which is 50. I subtract and get 0. So that means 3/25 is the same as 0.12 or 12 hundredths. So let me write that out. That's 12 hundredths, that's 12 hundredths, that's 12 hundredths, that's 12 hundredths, and that's 12 hundredths. All right, so now I have a couple of percents. And so one thing that we've learned in class this week is that when we convert percents into decimals, we just take off the percent sign, change it into a decimal, and move it over to the left 2 spaces. So 1% really becomes 0.01 as a decimal. 1% is 0.01. 1% is 0.01. 1% is 0.01. Then I have 10%. Well, if 1% is 0.01, because I moved it over 2 spaces to the left, I do the same thing for 10%. That becomes 0.1 or 1/10. Now everything I'm looking at is in decimal form, and this is great. And we did this in class a lot on number 4, and it's something we can do clearly on our quiz as well. And that is to create a number line. So I'm simply going to create a number line here, and I'm just going to number them from smallest to biggest. So what we did is we kind of had a number line from 0 to 1. But just to kind of spread things out on my paper, because I know all these are really small numbers. For example, the largest number that I see here is 0.125. That's a small number. That's just above 0.1 or 1/10, right? Let me start with the smallest number that I can possibly think I could see. So 1/10 is pretty small. 0.125 is bigger than that. 0.01 is really small. That's like super, super tiny, right? 1/10 is bigger than that. You would need 10 hundredths to get 1/10. So 0.1 or 0.01 is going to be our smallest point on here. Okay? So if I know 0.01 is the smallest point, let me look for the next smallest. All right? So if I have 0.125 and 0.12, if I add a 0 to the end of 0.12, it becomes 0.120. I didn't change the value, I just changed the look of it. If I take 1/10 and I add on 2 zeros, that's 0.100. If I think about it, 100 is smaller than 120, and 120 is smaller than 125. That's another great way to help you organize these and figure out which one's bigger than which. Okay? So with that understood, I know that 0.100 is going to be my next point. Or really, that could be just looked at as 1/10. Okay, the next one would be 0.120 or 12 hundredths, even 0.12. And then the next one I would have is 0.125. Do you see how we look at these? You can kind of think of whole numbers if you want to, even though we have decimals. 100 is smaller than 120, and 120 is smaller than 125. If you do this, you can think of this as being 10, because that's 0.010 if we wanted to do that. So now I need to look at all of my options here, A, B, C, D, and E, and figure out which ones are ordered from least to greatest. So I have 1/10, but here I have this one here. That's my smallest number. It's ranked 3rd, so it can't be A. Here I have my smallest number ranked 2nd. It can't be B. Here I have my smallest number ranked 1st, so I'm in good shape so far. Then I have 0.1, which is my next smallest, then 0.12, then 0.125. So C is written in order from least to greatest. Let me look at D. I have my smallest one first, which is good. Then I have 0.100, which is good. Then I have 0.12 and 0.12. They're back to back. They're the same number. There's no way to say this is smaller than that because they're the same. So really, letter D is correct as well, from smallest to biggest. In letter E, I have 1/10, then I have 0.01, so it can't be letter E. So my answers here on number 4 are C and D, and I figured that out by doing a whole lot of work. All right, so this is kind of a long video, and I realize that. That's because it's kind of a long working focus quiz. You're going to have to take your time to make sure you're answering all these questions correctly. I hope that I was able to offer you up an easy way to see all your options here for your focus paper for this week. Make sure you understand, though, you just want to zero in on one option. I think all too often people get confused. They think, well, I know there's 3 ways to do it, but I can't remember any of them. Instead of picturing all 3 of them, pick one way that works best for you, and that's going to be your method. So, I'm Mr. Regener. This has been the Aftermath. Thanks for watching, and good luck on this week's focus quiz.
Aftermath, it's aftermath, aftermath, it's aftermath. Math class is fun, but when it's done, stay in the zone on your own. It's math review, made just for you. Take a video wherever you go. Aftermath, it's aftermath, aftermath, it's aftermath.